What is going on, good people of the internet? Welcome to bonus stage for another awesome Let's Listen. Tonight we are listening to a new release from our lovely guest here, Dan, also known as Techno Mage. He is going to be dropping his album Hexproof in 2 days, and we've got him here to talk about it. How's it going, Dan?
Doing okay. How about you?
Doing pretty good. Looking a little hazy over there. Uh, you've got
Just setting the
quite
mood.
setting the mood. Oh my God. Well, I'm coming to you live from the city of Los Angeles in the year 2019, also to set the mood. Oh my God. Well, Dan, this is your first time on the show here. Why don't you give the folks at home a little introduction about Techno Mage?
Sure. So Techno Mage is a project that I started back in 2018. It was sort of born from a need to do things myself. I was getting very tired of always kind of waiting for other people to get their stuff together. So this was a project that was originally born as a solo project. And then as it went on, it became very clear that it was very necessary to have guitar. So for the first year or so, and during the recording and releasing of the first EP, Riser, I was working with a session guitarist, and we had such good chemistry that he eventually came on board as the live guitarist as well. We played a handful of shows leading up to 2020, and then COVID happened, and uh, and then on top of that, I became a dad, and all of that kind of derailed the live performances. Um, and then since then, the guitarist left the project, and I pivoted to making it a solo project again. But then, as I started working on this album, Hexproof, it became very obvious that at least for the studio album, this isn't going to happen by myself. Not with the ideas that I had in my head. We'll talk about plenty of them on the stream, I'm sure. But it was bigger than a one man show.
Oh my God. Well, you brought on some real heavy hitters to join you for this release for sure. We're going to be talking to Shubzilla and Yura later on today. They're featured on the second track. You've got Guam all the way over there in the UK, and Utalo as well, I believe you said from France. Yeah,
Mhm.
so yeah, what were your shortcomings in bringing these people on? What were you looking to get from them?
Well, I mean, all of these people I have a relationship with in some capacity. That tends to be how most of my collaborations end up shaping up. With rare exception. We'll talk more about uh, kind of what happened with Shubzilla and Yura. But Gwem, I originally had on my radio show back when I was hosting Chiptune Night. He was the first person to do a live performance on the show. Before that, it was just a podcast format, where I'd interview folks. And he misunderstood what I was asking when I asked him to feature his music on the show because I didn't know that it was a live album. So he thought I was asking, will you perform that album, the live album, on the show? And when he was like, oh, you mean this? I was like, yeah, let's do it. So that kind of snowballed into the show is now a virtual venue where I was not only doing the podcast, but I was organizing a set list of virtual live performances of folks in and around chiptune, and he was just so awesome to work with that I kept in touch with him, and while tuned into one of his streams, because he hosts a stream every Wednesday, I just casually mentioned, "Boy, it should be fun to cut a track together." And he's like, "Yeah, let's do it." So like immediately, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go write something right now," and I started writing something, and he immediately latched onto it. He was really easy to work with. We bounced ideas off each other really quickly, and it's probably the fastest I've iterated through a track with somebody. But he brought some really rad Atari ST. He wrote the the software that he uses to track Atari music. He also wrote a piece of software that lets him use a pair of.
Oh, and we've powered off. Oh no, we lost him. Oh no, Dan, can you hear me? Oh no. Oh, he said he was dealing with some technical issues just before joining the show. But yeah, no, that's really cool to hear about his work with Gwem there. We'll get him back on in just a moment here, folks, as he fixes that. But yeah, yeah, no battery. Exactly. That's what happens. You plug in your cameras, folks. Yeah, but you know what? You guys don't need to hear me talk all about his album. We're going to get him back on. So in the meantime, why don't we listen to the first 3 tracks on this album here, folks? If you want to follow along with the liner notes, I'm gonna put that link to Bandcamp in chat there. And we are going to listen to the first 3 songs on this album right now. We're going to be listening to Ghost. We've got Iron Sight featuring Shubzilla and Yura after that. And we're going to be listening to that aforementioned Gwem track called Precognition. So let's listen. Incredible. Holy crap. And we've got him back. Dan, everybody. Famously known as Techno Mage. As you've heard him now, we heard Ghost, Iron Sight, and Precognition. Of course, Ghost setting the scene there. Got to have a nice, strong opening for your album. But yeah, I said in chat that didn't really seem very ethereal. It sounded like a pretty solid track, like you could put your hand up to it and touch matter. Yeah, God, man. I mean, this is all like original music. Like, where do you want to start with breaking down some of these tracks? Yeah, let's start with Ghost and tell us kind of what your
Sure.
process.
With Ghost, people often ask producers uh, what their process looks like, and I've seen people that will say, "Oh, I always start with this." I never start with the same thing. And in the case of Ghost, I started with the drums, and I think that much is very obvious because it was a very central piece to the song, and everything was sort of constructed around it. Um, it's also the first and only song I've done for Techno Mage written that has a 3/4 section, so there's a time signature change in the chorus, which is not very common for Techno Mage. Um, but yeah, the whole point of this song, as I'm sure you were already picking up on, is it wasn't originally written as an intro song. That was actually my wife's idea. She said this would be a really good album opener. Um, but it's like all the songs on the album, they are loosely themed around this conceptual narrative. And I am right in the middle, right smack in the middle of the schools of thought that say the artist statement is important and the artist statement is irrelevant. So I want to I want to kind of pump the brakes and not, like, I don't want to say spoil too much, but I also want to leave a little bit open to people's interpretation. Um, I'll just say that the kind of the premise of the song is written around this idea of covertly trying to obtain information, and the song title "Ghost" is actually a reference to Deus Ex: Human Revolution, where if you complete a section in the game that has a stealth component to it, and you don't raise any alarms or alert anyone, then you would receive the Ghost trophy or achievement, in whatever platform you're using it on. So it's a reference to that. And also to, anytime cyberpunk uses the phrase ghost, it's always in reference to, a soul trapped in a machine. So
Yes, the Ghost in the Shell. Oh
yep.
man, the replicants and etc. Ad nauseum. Oh my god. Yeah, definitely. And then after that, we had Iron Sight with Shubs and Yura, and we actually have Shubs and Yura both here ready to join and talk a little bit about that track. We've got Yura in pixel picture form here, joining us with audio only. But if she wants to speak, maybe I can just move her
Yes.
picture around a little bit. Oh man, Yura, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I just landed from Korea, so a little bit jet lagged, but I'm hanging in there.
Wait, where are you?
I'm in Seattle now. I'm back home now, but I just came back from like a 3-week vacation in Korea.
Oh my god,
The
That-
motherland.
the motherland!
oh my god, that sounds amazing, and what a thing to land to. Shubs, how are you doing?
Well, it's another fucking day on God's beautiful earth, Josh. Um, you know, she was a parent. She's a parent still. She put on her falsies. She found a lipstick, and now she's here with y'all, and then y'all in chat.
Wow, preach it,
Really
Shubs.
glad you could make it.
It's almost very much like old times, but I don't know
Yeah.
if Dan's gonna get into it, but because I could go
Oh,
all
let's
the
get into
way
it.
about the tea.
Yeah.
So
Oh man, we got some tea to spill.
we got well, it's context, right? And I will then shut the fuck up. One, I think this is one of the first songs I haven't like sworn in a while, at all. I asked Dan, I was like, all right, like, am I referencing hoes? Can I hit somebody? And the answer was no. And the particular plot of the song, it wouldn't make sense for me to hit a hoe. So, you know, fine. Um, keeping it G-rated for the kids
Oh man.
for Techno Mage.
I will say my 4-year-old loves Techno Mage. So the fact that he can listen to his Auntie Shubs perform on a song without having to explain, Daddy, what's a hoe?
And how do you spell it?
Haux, obviously.
uh,
Already know. But other than that, like Yura, Dan, and I were on a test team together many moons ago before I was a mother and all that. And um I think, and Josh, I was telling you last night that fun fact, Dan was the one to hire me on. So Dan was like my lead boss person. Um and
If y'all
with
can
me,
imagine working next to Shubs.
this Shubs or like teenage Shubs? Oh man.
Oh, this was recent-ish.
this
Okay.
was
Like
recent. This was like
6
what?
years, 5 years ago, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said
Yeah, it
six.
was
And I was
5
like
years
recent.
ago.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So and I gotta like I think at one point I sat between both Yura and Dan, and like I would just yell at how shitty our job was, and how much we need to get paid, and a nap time, and that sort of gig. So that's kind of, I guess, like how, at least from my side, allegedly, supposedly, in her opinion, we all just kind of found each other, right? So I guess it's Dan's fault, really.
Not sorry.
Not sorry. No, neither am I. And it just so happened that this like fucking awesome like group of people whom we like coined ourselves as the children of Danos. Like, you remember that? That
I
shit was
do.
that shit was hype. We had like a sign and everything. It was like squad, gang, skirt. Um, but it just so turned out that there were just so many different artists around us. Like folks were into Gunpla. I mean, clearly there's all of us on that, like, are singers and rappers and performance artists, and beat makers and instrumentalists. I mentioned our homie who had a big hand in Astroneer. um so there's just like, from our group, from the children of Danos, like, it's just, we've just been glowing up, like, ever since, whether it's like professionally in the day job that we're at, or just because we're amazing and talented people, and people should just be lucky to know us.
While you're talking
My
about
bad.
the Children of Danos, it reminded me of you mentioned the sign. The the guy who drew that, Matt, he actually sang choir on the album as well. Um,
Mhm.
but he drew me as Thanos, and at the time I had long hair, so he gave Thanos my long hair, and I had the Infinity Gauntlet. And
Oh
I
shit,
don't
I
remember
remember.
what he'd written as the caption, but like the graphic stayed on that whiteboard long after I was even in that office, and it just stayed there for a long time apparently.
Mhm.
And we had all these, like, we had nicknames for the rooms, different Wi-Fi names, and that was the Children of Danos room because that's the room that I worked in.
Mhm. It
Oh
was
my god.
great. Potlucks were awesome.
I just want to
Um
say, Shubs, your angry cries is what kept most of us sane through, through the QA work. So yes, major props to you for that.
Well, I
I
mean,
like. Oh, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say to segue into the song, that's 100% the point of why I tapped Shubs for this,
Yes.
uh, because if it wasn't clear, it's it ain't a content song. It's not a quiet song. It's not a peaceful song. And I couldn't think of anybody better to bring that kind of fire to it than Shubs.
Oh
When
my
have you
god.
known me to be so subtle and just serene? and I got content, at ease. The fuck
I
is
mean,
that?
besides how fast you're rapping on this song, it might be one of the most subdued songs I've heard from you.
Okay, yeah, fair. Fair.
So
Fair.
Oh,
Subdued but intense at the same time. Like,
Word. Like, that was Shubs, a gentle soul. I am a gentle soul and a good Catholic woman at that. Sorry, I just saw chat.
and she
Yeah.
makes a mean brisket.
Ooh, sure do. We'll talk later. You need to come over.
oh my
Josh,
god,
you too.
yes.
yeah.
We're gonna figure this shit out.
Yeah.
But like with writing, I think this was like one of the first chiptune um and very like orchestral like songs that I've written to. So like I wanted the challenge, and of course like you can ask anybody that was a part of our test team, like we ride for Dan, like we ride at fucking dawn. So you know Dan and I had talked about like doing a collab here and there anyway, so this was like okay, perfect, well this is, let's fucking go. um but then the challenge for me came with like okay, how am I going to structure my lyrics? How am I going to structure this verse? Is this a verse? And then I had like a 3-day like contemplation on what made a verse. It was very transformative. I journaled about it often and also cried to Bill Beats. But there is a lot that like I really had to like hone in on. Okay, well what, like it doesn't have to be this dot 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 structure every fucking time. Like get weird, get wacky. And there were many a time where I would just text Dan and be like, I'm sorry, I can't fucking figure my life out. Like, what do I need to do again? And so, like, it was like clearly, it's a hype track, and it's definitely one of those tracks that um made me excited to collab with people. But also too, y'all already know I don't collab with some random hoe. I'm only collabing with family. So, you know.
It was bound to happen, I think, is the big takeaway. We already knew
Yeah.
it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when. So when I started writing a new album, it was almost like I kind of need to write a song that uh, that will use Shubs' talent.
Oh, God bless you, Dan. Thank you.
And then as producer, you get to like create a song where you can find a spot where the vocals just kind of nestle in and just kind of give them that space. Like you did for Yura as well. Yura, did you write your lyrics and your melodies as well, or did you have some help from Dan on that?
I definitely needed some like context regarding that, so it was an interesting way we went about, or that Dan approached me about writing like the lyrics and the vocal. Like originally, as from a fan perspective, I was only doing like choir parts on this album, and then and I knew, or Dan had told me, it felt like a very special secret, like top secret type of thing, that he was like, oh, I'm collabing with Shubs. I'm just like, oh, he's collabing with Senpai. Like I'm like so excited, and like I was like, oh cool. And then like months later, Dan approaches me. He's like, "Well, was it? I think originally Shubs was also supposed to sing."
Oh yeah.
Well, it was never
Yeah.
decided. It was never decided. I asked, I just asked, here's the structure, here's where I want you to fit in, go crazy. And then when I got the tracks back, which were awesome, I was so excited about them. As soon as I got them, I was like, this is way more than I was expecting. Not that I was at a low bar, I had a high bar, but it was just, well past that.
Mm.
But there was a big hole where the chorus would be. And I said, you singing chorus? And she, no, I'm not singing chorus. So the question of, okay, well, who's singing on the chorus then? Because that's a big vocal shaped hole that we've got to fill, and obviously it's a very crucial part of the song. It didn't take really any thought or effort. That I mean, there was already this cool factor of, yeah, working with Shubs, we might as well work with the whole fam. We might as well bring Yura into the mix, because up until this point, Yura had been recording. And correct me if I'm wrong, Yura, but I think at this point you'd been recording choir for the album for a little bit now, so you were already kind
Yes.
of getting into the flow of working with me
Right.
as a creative, and um, I had already been spending. I've been nose down editing choir, and like going through with a scalpel on your tracks, and
Yes.
and I just remember it being so incredibly easy to work on your choir tracks because your pitch control was so uh, tight and so practiced. I know you're gonna say, "Oh, well, I'm really out of practice," but like compared to the
Girl!
compared to you know a lot of people that I know, this was something that was just you know just like working with Gwem was effortless. Working with Euro was effortless on the choir, and so I knew that if we brought them on board for Ironsight's vocals, it was going to be more of the same. The real challenge, and I think this applied to both Euro and Shubs, is neither of them are coming from a background of metal. Neither of them are coming from a background of synth or chiptune, really. I mean, and those are the main ingredients in Techno Mage. But uh, it was it still felt like a really good pairing to me. So it became a question of, what does the track need to sound like for it to make sense for this? And so where I ended up landing is, obviously, you got all your staple ingredients from Techno Mage, but it ended up sounding a lot more like an industrial track, where you got like the really, really overdriven vocals, because you should have seen the vocal chain that I put on Euro. It was just like, I don't know, like 20 different plugins. I mean, it doesn't even sound that harsh at the end of the day, but like
Yeah.
the difference between the dry signal and what we ended up with is really intense. There's like echoes and reverbs all over the place, and I lost count of how many distortion plugins. And the same was true of Shubs as well. It was just like these ridiculous vocal effects chains that, you know, really played into that industrial aesthetic. But I think that's exactly where the track needed to go.
Yeah, I think that having them on um, really just kind of like added that human element to the cyberpunk aesthetic that you're trying to reach. Um, you know, obviously, like in the cyberpunk world, people are also struggling a little bit, and so having a little bit of that dark urban vibe with that human touch, yeah, just really conveyed what the themes of Techno Mage. Absolutely. Shubs, you're excellent performance on that track, and really looking forward to whatever the heck you two are doing with or without Techno Mage next. But thank you for joining us for a little segment here on Let's Listen today. And if you want to hang around, maybe we'll get a chance to get your impressions on some of the other stuff that's coming up later on today.
Bet. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, no problem. We'll chat you up soon.
See ya.
Oh, I gotta put away. I gotta put away the little JPEG there. Oh my god! And then, of course, we also heard with Gwen. I mean, I'm pretty sure I picked out Gwen's sound immediately.
Mhm.
He's got a pretty distinctive style, and yeah, like you said, it was really easy working with him, right?
Yeah, and the only thing that I didn't really get to mention before my camera kicked the bucket was that he also performed guitar on that track. Folks that follow him know that he makes Atari music mostly, but he also makes rave music. He also raps, and he also plays metal guitar. So, I mean, just like from that description alone, perfect pairing for Techno Mage. And so I knew immediately that I wanted him playing guitar on the track. So all the lead guitar is actually him, and most of that was improvised. So he would just kind of go through a few times and rip out a few phrases and say, "What do you think of this?" And there was like, I think of what we kept, there was a single note that I had to fudge into place, and everything else was just like, "This is awesome. This is so good." And so, you know, there's that the only other bit that I would say is just like so um, central to that song is his Atari, very demo scene sounding solo between the second and third verse. And when he sent me that track, it was just coolest thing ever. And I knew right then, oh, I've got to have an NES track that dances in and around that Atari lead, just where they're almost like warring guitars, but instead they're chiptune hardware.
God, he's so cool. I love what Gwen does. Oh my god, I want him
Glenn
back
is
on the show
awesome.
again. Holy shit, I gotta get on him.
You
Um,
do.
yeah. Well, you've got like you haven't done the whole album by yourself. We still have a feature from Utello as well, but you've been just kind of casually dropping all about the choir that's featured on this album as well. Have we had the privilege of hearing any of that yet? I have a hard time picking it out.
Yeah, I mean, you're commenting on something that is also kind of integral to Techno Mage, and that's these very, very dense arrangements. Um, yes, we have heard two songs with choir so far. There's seven, I think, out of the 11 songs on the album. Both Iron Sight and Precognition had choir on it. And that was actually, Precognition was the song that gave me the idea to do live choir. It's that bit in the first verse when it does the dun, 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 dun. That's the part where I said, oh, that phrase needs live choir, especially like a soaring soprano section. Um, so I just started kind of researching and said, gosh, is this something that I can kind of recreate virtually? I don't have a good choir plugin. They're too expensive, and I think it would be really cool to be able to record and edit my own virtual choir with people that I know. So I just started reaching out to everybody that I knew that could sing, and said, "Do you want to sing on the choir?" And I put out a big blast, and people that I wasn't as familiar with, they would get back in touch with me, and I got to know them better as a result of it. But we already mentioned that my old coworker Matt, he performed choir on it. There's a bunch of other folks in and around chiptune. You got Sam Mulligan on there, um, and my good friend from France. It's spelled eight ricks, but I think it's pronounced bricks because the whole theme of the artist is Legos. Uh, he sang on it too. Both he and Yura contributed a huge amount of choir to this album. And to give you just an idea of how much choir is in this album, when I was done editing choir, which took me about 3 months, I ended up with about 300 multi-track files of choir. Like, and that's because there were, maybe about 20-ish tracks of choir per song, roughly, give or take. Some had much more, and part of that I owe really heavily to Brix and Yura, because both of them have huge vocal ranges. Yura starting down on contralto all the way up to soprano, so spanning three different ranges. And the same was true of Brix. He would do a little bit of baritone. He did some tenor, and I think he did. Well, he also. I'm going to get into it a little bit later, I think, but as his other artist alias, he contributed throat singing to the album as well as Utello, and he is a featured. That artist persona is a featured on the final track. But yeah, so both he and Yura, not only were they singing across these huge ranges, both of them were going well out of their way for each of these, because I wrote for parts. I said, here's baritone part one, baritone part two. For each part that they sang, which was at least, 6 or 7 different parts per song, they were double tracking. So they were giving me 2 tracks of each. So I would, I had this huge pile of choir tracks, and it was just like, yes. But obviously it helped really fill it out. I didn't want it to be so obtrusive that it was just like, whoa, okay, that's a lot of choir. But I also wanted it to be something that really um, just provided a richness to the music. And I think it totally did. I wouldn't do it the way I did it this time again. but and that's just because it was a huge, colossal amount of work. But I think the end result was totally worth it. There's a couple songs on the album that we'll get to where it's impossible to not hear it. Self-Diagnostic, for example, starts with a really baritone heavy choir section that's very front and center. It's very much in the vein of like Mick Gordon's Doom soundtrack, some of the more ambient stuff. But anyway, yeah, the choir, I think the next handful of songs we're going to hear a little bit too. The next one, for example, Hollow Point Havoc, there's a small section in that one that just really puts a nod on the song, even though it's not pervasive through the whole song. Getting to that one spot, it's like, that's exactly what needed to go there.
Awesome. Well, I would love to dig into that. So, folks, coming up next, we have another 3 tracks from Hexproof. As mentioned, Hollow Point Havoc. If you go over to Bandcamp, you can listen to this song right now, or you could just hold on 10 seconds and we are going to listen to it right here. We've also got Bleeding Edge and Neurotransmitter coming up. So, Dan, we missed your opportunity to do this last time, but if you've seen any of our shows with Let's Listen, I like to hand it off by saying, let's
listen.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Love those hooks. Love hearing that choir. Yeah. Very, very full sound. Absolutely. Techno Mage fully realized, everybody. We just listened to Hollow Point Havoc, Bleeding Edge, and Neurotransmitter. Hollow Point Havoc, Dan. My goodness. What do you want to say about this?
Yeah. All right. So talking about the premise of songs, this one, um, as the name sort of implies for anybody that is familiar, a hollow point round is a very deadly type of round, and the name was sort of written to sound to kind of set the scene for this is a song that is an anthem to a firefight between the titular character and the act antagonist of this, of this arc. And it was a pleasant surprise that the name ended up sounding like the level for a Donkey Kong Country level. Hollow Point Havoc. It sounds very much like Minecart Carnage, like that
Yeah.
kind of a thing. Just that nice alliteration. But no, so given that was the premise, the whole song needed to have just this larger than life energy to it, where everything was just a wall of sound. This is, I think, the song where I spent the most time designing synth patches. I mean, I usually build my synth from scratch, but the bass synth in this one, I think I ended up with about 30 layered voices to get that sound. Now, granted, I wasn't going in with a scalpel and saying, "Oh, well, that one needs to move around here," and some of it were some pretty broad strokes, and some of it was like, "Okay, well, now I'm going to double those voices." But suffice it to say, it ended up being a very articulated, very wide sound in terms of stereo width, and yeah, that I think was kind of the important, that and the drums were kind of the important components of that song to really sell that feeling, and it's meant to really encapsulate, what would in real time be 30 seconds. So I always, when I hear this song, I always play it out as if it's in slow-mo, so it's got an energy that's not so breakneck that it feels like it's real time, like you're processing things as they're happening, but the energy and the tone and the mood, all of that is very much like if you've ever played Shadowrun, it's sort of like that, where you roll for your initiative. I can't remember what the Shadowrun changes the names of everything just for the sake of it.
For
But
aesthetics.
there's a score that you have that's basically, for as long as you've got score left, you can continue to make moves once it gets back to you until that's depleted. That's kind of what it reminds me of, is how a combat session in Shadowrun plays out, where you're, scrambling to try and, calculate in these tiny tolerances what is the appropriate move, because if you don't make the right one, then that's the only choice. So that's kind of the premise behind Hollow Point Havoc. Bleeding Edge. This one is it's kind of a two-part premise. You really get that second part in that outro section with the really lush choir section, when the song takes sort of a sudden turn from its soaring melodies and really focuses on that heavy rhythm. So the opening part is sort of a hopeful anthem, where you're you're kind of coming off the coattails of some really really heavy emotion, some really fight or flight kind of response to things, and then you kind of had a crash for this hopelessness of like, I don't know what to do now, and then suddenly get filled with a new tinge of hope. And that's kind of how the main overarching theme of Bleeding Edge plays out. In the case of the story, the character has finally gotten a lead on where to go next, and they're avidly pursuing this next path, all the while this looming antagonistic force is in pursuit of them. And that's kind of the end section, is this kind of a callback or a call over to this looming antagonist that is just slowly approaching. And then Neurotransmitter. This one is probably the most, I would say, emotional song on the album, and that's 100% the reason it was written as a ballad. I saw folks in the chat joking about, oh, Phil Collins drums, Phil Collins. Obviously, like, the song sounds nothing like Phil Collins, but I know, like, the point of that comment is, these gigantic cannon shot snares and gated reverb drenching these drum tom fills. That very much was an aesthetic choice to kind of set the scene for like this big arena kind of ballad kind of a sound. Um, the the song takes place from the same perspective as the narrator of Iron Sight, and is very much that same voice talking, but this is the other side of that personality. This is them showing vulnerability. This is them showing uh, kind of a helplessness, just really kind of dropping their shields in a very rare moment. And that's kind of what this song is about, is them kind of pouring their heart out. So yeah, that's what that arc is essentially about.
Oh my God. What a rich story. God, I love it when a musical artist finds like a reason to put together all of these songs and to have like a common thread all kind of woven throughout. It just makes the art so much better. I love it. It's my personal favorite. Yeah, and also like supporting your narrative, you have this incredible cover album as well. In theory, highlighting said protagonist and maybe antagonist. Tell us what's going on in this image here.
Oh yeah, in the cover album. So this is, or sorry, the cover of the album art.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got the titular character. If you look at any of the album covers for any of the previous Techno Mage releases, you'll see the same Techno Mage character that appears, and that's the character with the green goggles, the green mask, green lenses, excuse me.
The
That
Techno
design is
Mage,
actually
if you
based
will.
off of a mask that I fabricated, I smithed by hand in college over a 10-week metalworking course. It was a fine metalworking course, but I wanted to build in a much larger scale because I was possessed by this idea to make this mask. Um, it was very strongly inspired by gas masks, obviously, but the whole thing was made out of copper, and I want to say it was 14 gauge, so it was not light but not super heavy. It had acrylic lenses for the eyes, and I wired LEDs inside it so that you could flip a switch and the eyes would actually glow green like this. Um, so the name itself of Techno Mage is borrowed from previous experience working on other music projects. The mask was borrowed from a real life art project that I worked on. So in a lot of ways, this whole music project is a culmination of a lot of things. It's kind of where my artistic journey has led me, and it's, to me, the only logical place that it could have gone. Um, but because of how much personal significance is attached to it, I feel a really strong responsibility to the art, to this project, and it I think is the reason why you see things like these big narratives, or why I'm willing to spend 3 months on a editing choir and things like that. But more to like your question about what's going on in the album, on the cover. Sorry, because I kind of got away from that.
Yeah, it's all good.
You've got the Techno Mage character, and they're confronting. We talked about this lead that they had, where they said, "Great, I might finally have some answers to what I've been, this thread that I've been pulling at." In this case, it was a name and a location. This person, who, as it would turn out, is the narrator for both Neurotransmitter and Iron Sight, and that's who's on the left. This person is infamously untrusting of outsiders, and because they don't have any personal rapport with one another, that's why the Technomage character is at gunpoint, because this is a person who has spent the last several decades underground, metaphorically, and has kept everyone at an arm's length. No exceptions made to that. So this is sort of a confronting that character scene, which plays obviously into the narrative of the album.
Yeah. Well, it's too bad that the person with the gun is going to find out that the Techno Mage is hexproof. I guess we'll find out more about what that actually means as we continue listening through this incredible album. Yeah, coming up next, we've got another 3 songs. We've got Self Diagnostic, Silver Tongue, and God Mode. What do we have to look forward to? Production or musically or narrative or otherwise?
Yeah, this is, I would say, where the album takes a very distinct tonal shift. The up until Neurotransmitter, everything is very like pedal to the metal, just coming out with all guns blazing, as much energy as possible. Neurotransmitter kind of shakes that up by introducing this ballad, and then we get a really a really direct look into this pursuing antagonist that's referenced at the end of Bleeding Edge in Self-Diagnostic, and that's probably one of the more brooding and menacing songs on the album, I would say. But as it continues to go on, I would say the tone of the album is gently shifting towards more atmospheric, away from this aggressive kind of an aesthetic. So by the end of the album, the last pair of tracks that we'll end with, we'll have what are almost completely orchestral arrangements with this, very pervasive synth element to it. So the next handful of tracks, I would say, are transitioning towards that, with maybe the exception of God Mode, which is kind of a last hurrah for the album's, get all our energy out.
Awesome. All right. Well, then with that, let's
listen. Sorry, I got it.
You got it. You got it. Wow. Yeah, I felt that high of being on God mode. Man, kids these days, they don't know what God mode is. They got their tutorials and their auto saves. They don't know our struggles, man.
I still remember the cheat codes for Commander Keen 4 to enable God mode. You do A2 enter to enable debug commands, and then F10G to enable God mode.
Wow. That's you're going to die with that knowledge. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh man, well we were talking a little bit about a little bit backstage about video games and more or less their effect on your composition and things like that. You know, we've got hints of cyberpunk. Obviously, you do actually credit VGM as a strong influence in your
Yep.
compositions for Techno Mage. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a broad question. How have video games impacted your life, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, for anybody that's loosely affiliated with the chiptune community, that's a very loaded question because it's like in every way, but but more directly as for like what translates to Techno Mage, because there's way more there than just VGM. But I think it's a very central part of the instrumentation, and I think that's really the takeaway is the way that I go about writing is very much tapping into kind of the engagement I got from interacting with soundtracks that were important to me when I was a kid, discovering this music for the first time. You know, we are talking about it backstage, but before I heard any of the the classic electronic genres, like your trance and your hardstyle and your drum and bass, this was the electronic music I was exposed to, specifically MS-DOS games. The later ones that were very sample heavy and the ones that really left their mark on me were Jazz Jackrabbit, the first one, and Tyrion. So the composer of the first one, Alex Brandon, no sorry, the second one. No surprise that they went on to go and compose the soundtrack to Deus Ex, which cyberpunk is about as cyberpunk as it gets as Deus Ex. So it's to me it's a very full circle kind of a experience, and I'm actually in talks with. I don't want to spoil too much, but I might try and cut a track with Alex Brandon down the road. The mastering engineer on the album, Stemage, they're both involved in lots of different circles, and Alex is one of their friends. So had them intro us, and I'm hoping something cool comes out of it. So anyway, as for how it impacts Techno Mage, these two soundtracks just really kind of shaped my idea of what music could be and the sorts of things you could say with it and the kinds of energy it could carry, and a lot of Techno Mage is sort of an attempt to tap into that kind of raw potential of like childhood me just kind of you know super floored by what I'm hearing and not having any context for what anything that like there was nothing that preceded it in my experience as a kid. And that's sort of what I try to craft with Techno Mage, is something that when people hear it, there's nothing that precedes it. There's nothing that it directly calls back to. It's just this unprecedented, huh, that's something different. And obviously, everybody tries to create something new. But I think I'm very subconsciously attempting to tap into that kind of energy when I write for Techno Mage.
That's amazing. And like the excitement and the narratives that are throughout video games. Obviously, there's some contribution there as well. Lots of conflict and the musical archetypes that go into compositions like that as well. They're definitely showing themselves very clearly in your music. Self-diagnostic, Silver Tongue, God Mode, the change in tone for the album for this section. Yeah, is there anything that you want to break down about each or all or none of these tracks?
Yeah, I mean, we already talked a bit about self-diagnostic. As the name implies, it is from the perspective of a non-human character. And this is the antagonistic force that's pursuing the Techno Mage character that we get a glimpse of in Bleeding Edge. this is sort of their theme song. Is just sort of an ode to this character. And that's actually so I don't think I sent it to you, but for the CD or any of the physical merch, the reverse artwork features this character, as well as directly on the disc itself. So anybody that's been somewhat active in the Techno Mage Discord, they'll probably have seen it pop up periodically, but there's a skull motif, and that's very directly related to this character. So that's self-diagnostic is really just kind of an examination of this character's just lack of emotion and callousness, to its objectives. It's very by the book. It's very clinical for this character. Oh, there you go. You found it. Yep. So there is the character in kind of the lore is unofficially deemed Cyber Samurai, which is a reference to the robot helpers that you get in Shatterhand for the NES. There's a particular one you can get that's like a floating cyborg that has a sword. This character doesn't have a weapon of choice, quote unquote. I see it obviously from kind of the design of the character. There's some very direct references to Terminator, and there's much in the same vein. There's not a go-to weapon of choice. It's very much a resourceful, use what you find kind of a thing. So it's more just a nickname for this character. But anyway, yeah, the song is exploring that character's kind of lack of depth, I guess, and just kind of the terror that comes with them having identified the Techno Mage character as a target. So after that, gosh, Silver Tongue.
Silver Tongue, yes. The
This
crappy
is
one.
another Deus Ex reference, the song title. When you complete a dialogue segment in Human Revolution that yields the best possible outcome, you will get the Silver Tongue achievement. So this song is a reference to the anxiety that the character feels approaching the complex where this character that he would enter into a firefight in Hollow Point Havoc. That song is about the two of them in conflict. Silver Tongue is about them kind of approaching this encounter with a lot of anxiety, knowing that it's probably going to go south. So there's a lot of unsettling tones in the song. It starts with that very eerie atmosphere, and it when the arrangement kind of widens into something that's a lot more full and lush, it becomes sort of a very terrifying kind of a sound where it's very bone chilling. So it's kind of exploring that unease that the character's feeling. Musically, the song also references Deus Ex a lot. In Human Revolution, in the final combat sequence, when you're fighting off against this character that's plugged themselves into a hive mind machine, there's a really, really intense song that accompanies it, that it's very drum focused, but very steady. And that's sort of, there's a lot of musical references to that music as well. God Mode, this one I think I would say is the companion track to Bleeding Edge, where that song is all about kind of finding hope after this crash of despair. God Mode is sort of the exploration of that determination and just tenacity that comes with pursuing a cause that you really believe in or that is really important to you. The song title, as I mentioned over the break, is a reference to whenever I play shoot 'em up games like Tyrion or any of the other really rad ones. The reason I play these games is because there is nothing that replaces that feeling of just weightlessness you get when you have every power up possible So like if you grind through Gradius and you manage to upgrade your ship all the way and you've got all 4 options and they're all just like firing full steam, you just sit back and you're just like, oh, this is cool. Like that feeling of like, this is awesome is what God Mode is exploring. Very much in the vein of, I've got all the power-ups, I'm untouchable. So it's sort of exploring that kind of almost false sense of security, because as you mentioned in the break, like it only takes one stray bullet, and that's also intentional, because that feeling of the God Mode feeling is I'm untouchable, but you're not really, and that's actually very relevant to that album's title as well. Hexproof, for anybody that doesn't play Magic the Gathering, is a reference to Magic the Gathering. There's a mechanic where if you've given your creature hexproof, then it can't be the target of spells or abilities, meaning it's somewhat invulnerable. You can still do things to it if it's your own creature, but the idea is that this Techno Mage character, they feel like they're invincible. They think they can't be touched, but they can. And so it's very much playing into the central theme of how they ended up in such a tight spot in the first place, and that was their own hubris. They overreached, and it got them in hot water, and that's sort of where the hexproof name comes from, is lowering your guard because you think you're untouchable. So God Mode is sort of a further exploration of that feeling.
Wow, that's incredible, dude. Well, coming up next, we have the last 2 tracks on the album. As discussed, this is where the action kind of takes a turn, and we've got a bit of a denouement, as we say. Yeah, Critical Failure and Omnivision featuring Utello. I'm excited to hear some throat singing. Oh man. Yeah, where do we go from here? What do you want to tell us about these 2 songs before we get into them?
Sure. Critical Failure is all about exploring the sincerity of people who are being taken advantage of, and the just kind of the transparency that they conduct themselves with. And there's a really big weight that comes with that. Obviously with that kind of transparency, you're opening the floodgates to a lot of really not fun experiences and emotions. And this is sort of just kind of a song about saving space for that and being there in that moment with that sincerity. Whereas the final track is almost the complete opposite. It's an anthem to kind of the complacency of people who are so far removed from these groups that they will make choices that impact large amounts of people without regard for how they're affected. So it's, we can talk about it more after if you like, but it's definitely kind of they're meant to be contrasting each other. And awesomely enough, when I was writing both of these, they started as one track, and there was a point where I said, that's a completely different song. That needs to be its own separate track. And so this is one of those rare instances where I took an existing song and split them into 2. And it's interesting because they ended up being so different.
Amazing. Well, they still found their way together at the end of the album. Folks, this is Critical Failure and Omnivision featuring Utello. Let's
listen. I got it.
You got it. Wow, what an epic way to end an epic album, an epic narrative. Epic, epic, epic. Let's see everybody say epic in chat. Because that is it. That is all musically. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Dan, why don't you start us off with critical failure here? Here's all the epics rolling in.
Epic. Um, critical failure. The song title is a variation on critical fail. When you are playing a tabletop game and you roll a dice and you roll a 1, it's a critical fail, meaning that, if the DM, the dungeon master or game master, was to interpret that as an action, your character not only failed to do the action they were trying to do, but they did almost the exact opposite of their intention. So this is kind of a reference to, we talked about before the break that this was a song kind of about saving space for those struggling. It's in a lot of ways the song is a statement about society failing these people, society rolling a critical fail, essentially. Like even if they try to do right by these people, in a lot of ways they are creating more problems. And so it's sort of a meta narrative about, not just this conceptual universe that Techno Mage exists in, but more to our own reality too, of how complex all of it is, and just how, in a lot of ways we've made great strides forward, in a lot of ways we've made big steps backward, and it's just kind of a dissection of that, just how complex that is and how heavy that feels. Omnivision, the song is, I wouldn't say told from the perspective of, but it's about the CEO of the big bad mega corporation, if you want to call them that, of the same name. So Omnivision is this company's name, and they're kind of the all-pervasive IT surveillance news outlet, what have you. They are ever present, omniscient, and too powerful. And this is sort of this is an exploration of that character, this leader of this organization, kind of scheming and trying to enact this plan that, as we talked about earlier, is very irreverent to the ways in which it impacts others, and in a lot of ways is directly aimed at the Techno Mage character and sort of the things that they represent. I won't spoil too much, but the Cyber Samurai character is very much related to this company, and they're interconnected. So the same kind of menace that you expect to hear in phrases or songs that reference that character are present here, I would say.
Yeah, I can definitely hear that now that you mention it. Good theming. Oh my god. Huh. Well, yeah, that's incredible. This album is coming out in 2 days on Friday. Folks, I'm going to drop that link in chat one more time. If you have not pre ordered, I highly recommend you do so. Bandcamp is still the best way for artists to make any kind of compensation or living off of their art. So recommend you go on over there. This is going to be released on some interesting physical media as well. Looks like we've got some compact discs coming in, also cassettes, because that's just aesthetic.
Definitely.
Yeah. When can people expect to see those coming out?
Well, both of them are open for pre-order right now. Cassettes will ship a little bit later because of a print issue, but I haven't officially announced it, but I'm happy to do it here too. There is also going to be a re-release of the Riser EP on cassette as well. So there's going to be the cassettes, the CDs, and then I've teased it on my website, and I'm going to put together some promo material for it. But a big upcoming format that I haven't talked about in an official context yet is Hexproof for the NES. And for folks that have already listened to the album, which is everybody here, it's very obvious that the NES plays a pretty strong role in the sound of Techno Mage. In my workflow, I'm often split between my fully featured DAW and a tracker, where I'm writing music for NES, and then I'll bring it into my DAW. So when I started writing music for the NES, I've always wanted to release something on a physical cartridge. Well, last year I discovered a tool that somebody had written that takes the NSF format, which is the Nintendo Sound file. It's the official format for music written for NES. That takes a file that, the tracker that I'm comfortable using is fully capable of outputting, and says, okay, I'll turn that into an NES ROM where you can listen to this as an album. And it's got some nice UI elements like a main menu and an info section and a track picker. And when you pair that with other tools, you can really start doing some cool stuff with it. So I have completely rearranged the Hexproof album for the sound of the NES. So taken these big giant arrangements and squashed them down to 5 channels. And I think it was an exercise in focus, I would say, but I think in a lot of ways the translation was pretty one-to-one. There's a lot of things that maybe didn't make it in,
like the
maybe somebody
the 20 or so choir flavor. Takes or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like the choir obviously sounds a bit different on NES, but I think the important part and the whole reason why chip as a style of writing is important to me and why it's relevant to Techno Mage is it's all about finding the spirit of the song. And I already knew what the spirit of those songs were. So, arranging them for this was really just kind of an exercise in sound design. And I tapped a really, really skilled friend of mine, Infu, who is infamous for the way in which he handles the Game Boy. He's got a reputation for being able to squeeze every last drop of potential out of a sound chip. And I tapped him to basically fill a producer role in this rearrangement and say, what's it missing? So the album on NES will come out on a physical cartridge. It will get packaged with a manual and a box. It's going to have really beautiful artwork on all sides of it. There's going to be in the actual game, if you want to call it that, when you power on the cartridge and you are listening to the songs, there is there's pixel art version of the Cyber Samurai character with the Hexproof logo. So it's a very different sonic experience than this one, but in so many ways I feel like it's a really direct companion to the album because it's all referencing the same underlying framework. So yeah, I mean the short version is this is sort of a dream realized for me, is releasing music on NES cartridge, and like the cassettes.
Oh, we lost him again. Oh, like the cassettes. Dan, no. At the last minute, you were saying so many wonderful things, and I wanted to finish hearing all of them. Gosh, folks, it's tough out here as an artist, isn't it? All right. Well, I'm sure he'll bounce back in just a sec. Yeah, God, folks. No. He'll be back in just a moment. Yeah, God, we were going to talk about. I want to know if he's planning to do any live performance. Oh, hold on, there he is. There we go. Got him back
Hey, I'm back.
in an instant.
Woo.
Woo. Living on the edge. The
Yeah,
bleeding
tech is
edge.
not my friend tonight.
Oh man, that's what the whole album's about, isn't it?
It is very appropriate.
Oh man, if only we could have omnivision of you all night with all these technical problems. Anyway, you were talking about the cassettes, I believe. You were finishing up about the NES cartridge and saying something about the cassettes, I think.
Oh, I had said, like the cassettes, the
Oh,
cartridges had a small print packaging delay, and so uh, the the announcements for that is going to come probably later this month. So
right on.
that's what to expect there.
Awesome. And you know that there's no shortage of other things coming up for this release. I hear that there's going to be a music video for Iron Sight, something about a text adventure game on 3.5-inch floppy. I mean,
Yep.
yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah,
And
I
are
mean,
we
I could take up a lot of your time talking about that stuff, but I know we're near the end of the show, so I'll just tease it.
sure?
The Iron Sight video is going to be somewhere between a music video and a lyric video. The whole thing is digitally animated and takes place on a computer monitor. Um, it's a colossal amount of work, so that's why there's no official launch date. The intent was to have it ready for launch, but you know, is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You do what you can. Same is true of the text adventure game. The short version of what to expect, I tapped somebody who's very, very brilliant at scripting, and they wrote me an engine in assembly from scratch that can compile to a file for or a form factor that fits on a floppy disk, because that was the intention from the beginning. Was I want a text adventure that fits on a floppy. So I'm essentially writing more literally what a lot of this album is about in the form of a text adventure game. So you know, the young kids will call it a visual novel, but there's no visuals here. So this is all text based. You know, you're running it in a console window, and it's all, you know, dialogue paths and you know, look at this, get that kind of a thing. And it's been absolutely brilliant to work on. It's so much fun to work in this engine. And I'd say I'm about halfway done with this game, but I'm really stoked to share it with folks. Just there's going to be a really cool feeling that comes with having it on floppy and in front of me. And further down the road, I'm going to put them on these rad pink floppies too.
So cool. Oh man. Well, don't copy that floppy. Sorry, just had to shout my age from the rooftops. Well, if folks want to keep up with all of the cool things that are coming out through your project, we will send them over to your website, technomagemusic.com. Oh, thanks, Shubs. I appreciate that. Anytime somebody can validate my nerd cred. Oh, my God.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, I think we've still got Yura and Shubs backstage if we want to get them on here for a little Brady Bunch goodbye and thank you very much. Uh, there you are, Shubs. And hold on, let me get my picture of Yura as well. Oh my God. Shubs and Yura. Dan, of course, thank you so much for being on Let's Listen tonight. It was a real blast talking to you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
That was like such an abrupt like that. Then I was like, oh
yeah, sorry. Oh, it's all good. But yeah, folks, go and grab Hexproof over on Bandcamp and look for more coming out. Oh, we didn't even talk about the cover remix album. There's a whole lot of stuff that's coming down the pipeline for you, Dan, and wish you all the best and success. But yeah, we're gonna sign off for tonight. So thanks everybody for coming for Let's Listen tonight. We're gonna have another listening party on Friday for our friend Shane Stewart, and then next Friday to Sunday is going to be Bonus Stage Ultimate. So if you like what we're doing here on the channel, please tune in again. And otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks for listening.
Don't be a hoe.
Oh my God.